Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome all of you joining the public presentation organized by the Occupational Health Center. Today's the topic is about becoming a pro at procedural writing. We're so pleased to have Miranda Dineni from the Safety Services Manitoba. She's an occupational safety and health consultant from the agency. Miranda has been working in the safety industry for over 7 years. Miranda continues to create a numerous safety program that became both effective and manageable, inspire teams to build a strong safety culture, and train all levels of an organization to take the ownership in the internal responsibility systems. Miranda has extensive education in occupational safety and health. She has recently earned her Canadian Registered Safety Technician designation. She also holds her National Construction Safety Officer. These honor role in River College Occupational Safety and Health Certificate. And also she is a certified safety auditor as well. Miranda is working towards the Canadian Registered Safety Professional designation by the end of this year, 2024. For beginning the session, we would like to acknowledge that we are on the Treaty 1 territories, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Greek, Oji Greek, Dakota, and Diné peoples, and the homelands of Native nations. Occupational Health Center acknowledge we are all treaty people. We recognize the history and the impact of colonization on Indigenous peoples. We commit ourselves to active accountability, justice, equity, and reconciliation. For participating this session, you know that this session is already recorded. We are going to share on our social media and our website. Whoever haven't have a chance to join us the presentation, you feel free to share with some folks you think they'll be interested in this topic. And please put your question on the chat area. Miranda, we're going to answer it after her presentation. And also, if we cannot cover all the questions, maybe you may have some question later on, then after this session, you can feel free to contact Miranda in the future. For some people doesn't know about Occupational Health Center, we are the community health center funded by the Winnipeg Regional Health Authorities. We are located on 167 Sherbrooke Street, Winnipeg, Manitoba. We provide the services to the Manitoba workers with work-related health issues and work closely with Joint Workplace Health and Safety Committee for training. Our services is all free. Please visit our website for more information and resources. Then I will put our website, on the chat. Please now to join me to welcome Miranda.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm one of those people who takes compliments and turns it incredibly awkward, so thank you. Okay, so we've got a lot of information to jam pack into this hour. I'm gonna probably speak for about 45 to 50 minutes, and then we'll open that last 10 minutes, 15 minutes up for questions and answers. Do feel free to message me or email me after the fact. I'm more than helpful or willing to help you guys in the long run, okay? So I'm just gonna stop my video because I find it very distracting, and I'm gonna share my screen. Give me one sec. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Oops. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna get going here. We're gonna cover a couple topics.
Miranda, you're not on the presenter slide. This is maybe you may want to switch your screen for the display setting, probably.
How do I do that? Like that?
Nope. No, on the display setting, then you
yes, okay.
Duplicate slideshow, maybe.
Oh, there we go. Is that better?
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you so much. Okay, so a couple topics. We're going to go over some regulations and standards, the importance of critical task lists. We'll cover a hierarchy of controls and risk assessments, and then we'll break down job hazard analysis, safe work procedure, talk about some training and monitoring. Okay, so far what I saw there was somebody joining us from Halifax, which is amazing. What I've got here are Manitoba regulations, okay? So here we've got Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulations. That will be your provincially based regulatory standard, okay? Canada Labor Code, that's obviously our federal jurisdiction. Criminal Code of Canada, Workers' Compensation Board, and then standards. So when standards are put into our regulations, that's basically saying you now have to go and follow CSA standard to make sure you're meeting compliance, or ANSI. Okay. Why we have Workplace Safety and Health Act and regulations? Well, it provides us with the legal framework, sets out rights and duties of all parties in the workplace, and it does require workplaces to establish procedures for dealing with hazards. Okay, they enforce the law where compliance has not been achieved. Okay, with our Manitoba Safety and Health Act, so further duties of employers, what this states is we want to make sure all of our workers have information, instruction, training, supervision, and facilities to ensure, as far as reasonably practicable, the safety, health, and welfare of all of their workers. Furthering that, a workplace safety and health program must include a plan for training workers and supervisors in safe work practices and procedures. Okay, and then as stated, procedure needs to be reviewed every 3 years. Now, if things change in the workplace, we're obviously going to review and revise that earlier. But if nothing has changed, like no machines have been introduced, the layout of your work hasn't changed, there's not a new process involved in this type of work, that safe work procedure can be reviewed and signed off on every 3 years, okay? So you just want to make sure that if things are changing, you're also changing your documentation. Something that's really important too, and as a consultant, I see this frequently, try to get ahead with your documentation, right? You want to be proactive. So too often does it happen where something bad happens in the workplace, right? An injury or an incident, and a safety and health officer will come by the site and ask for proof of documentation and training and safe work procedures. That documentation isn't there or hasn't been produced yet. And now all of a sudden, everybody's kind of in a rush mode to produce these documents. Okay, we want to get ahead of that. That's where a critical task list can help us. Okay, so I won't really get into this. Our safety and health division, they help us with enforcement, providing improvement orders or stop work orders. They do hand out fines. Those aren't very lovely. They do help with reporting and then helping our investigations as well. Okay, now the Westray Bill. This established new legal duties for workplace health and safety and imposed serious penalties for violations that result in injuries or death. So under the criminal code, it does say everyone who undertakes or has the authority to direct how another person does work or performs a task is reasonable, has to take reasonable steps to make sure that that person is safe. Okay, CSA standards, very straightforward. Okay, they have over 1,500 standards that have been developed and published. Unfortunately, these do have to be purchased. I do want to touch base on that. If you do have any current CSA standards in your workplace, a lot were being updated January 2024. So just take a look online and make sure there's not a new updated version. Okay, you will have to go ahead and grab that now. Okay, so just a couple important definitions. We want to go through hazards, right? That's a thing or a condition that can expose a person to risk of injury or occupational disease. It's any potential source of harm, damage, or adverse health effects. Risk, this is the potential loss or the possibility that a person will be harmed, or how will they be injured or receive a health effect when exposed to a hazard. And then competency, having the necessary ability, knowledge, or skill to do something successfully. Okay, our critical task list. Again, with consulting, I feel like this is a 50-50 if an organization has it or not. If you're a core certified company, you typically would have this. It is a requirement or part of the questionnaire, the auditing. But if you don't, this is a really great place to start, okay? This basically takes all of your occupations or your departments and then breaks down each job or task that is performed under that occupation or department, okay? So what it does is it actually gives you a list of all the things that workers do in your workplace. Now, this could become a very long list. Obviously, we would kind of use some common sense here, and not like we wouldn't have to write, answering the phone. Okay, we're looking for those high hazard, those risky things that could cause somebody an injury, an illness, or cause incident. Okay, that's the moral of this, is we want to reduce as much of that as we can. Okay, so number one, we identify our critical jobs. Like I said, go through your occupations or your departments. An example of that, a carpenter is an occupation, right? And a job that they perform would be like cutting wood to the correct size. Okay, what is involved with that job? What kind of equipment do they need to complete that task, right? What kind of power tools? Okay, then we go into your evaluation. So we go through a risk assessment, and we'll go on the next slide. I'll go through what a couple of risk assessments would look like to you. Your organization can use whatever works for you, as long as it works for you and you've got that fluency. Everyone's using the same thing. Everybody knows how to read it. Okay. Number three, what we want to talk about too is including stats in our critical task list. Have there been a lot of near misses around a certain job and we don't have a safe work procedure for, or we haven't really talked about? Okay, is there something new within the workplace that is bringing on this hazard? Those are things that we want to look for. Okay, a part of this is we definitely want to make sure that this is an ongoing document. Okay, once it's done, it doesn't mean it's totally done. It's a living, breathing, continue filling it out kind of thing. Okay. So yeah, if you need any help with this, give me a call. We can help you for sure. Okay, here's an idea of a risk ranking matrix. So on our severity side, 1 is insignificant, 5 is severe. Okay, and then on our left-hand probability side, what would that look like, right? So working at heights without fall protection, where would that put us? That would probably put us in a severe rank, right? What is the worst thing that can happen? Well, somebody could fall, somebody could die. Okay, these are the things that we really want to look for. And on your critical task list, once you have everything listed, start writing the JHAs and SWPs for those really high hazard ones. We want to knock those ones out first, and then we can start working towards our green zone tasks. Okay, and green zone just means there is still hazard present, but it's not as severe. It's not life endangering. Okay. Another example of a risk matrix is our severity, probability, and frequency. Now, some organizations don't like using frequency. So like I said, whatever works for you and your crew, that's what this is all about. Okay. Okay, we should all know this one. This is pretty straightforward everywhere we go with safety and controlling hazards. But from the top, that is our most effective. We want to try to eliminate and physically remove the hazard as much as possible. Can we eliminate working at heights? Probably not, but could we possibly get a extension pole, right? Or something, a drone to investigate an issue? That's really cool. Like I worked with a roofing company and they send out a drone to do roof inspections instead of their workers. So I thought that was a great technology replacement. Okay. The second layer to this is substitution. So how can we replace the hazard? Can we switch out a toxic chemical to a non-toxic chemical, right? A lot of water-based paints came into the field. That was a game changer. Okay. Engineering controls. This is where we isolate the worker from the hazards. So we try to stop the hazard from totally reaching that worker. Okay. This would be like our barriers, ventilation units, you name it. Okay. And then administrative controls and PPE. Now, these do coincide with the top 3 control measures, but they're not the be-all end-all. Why do we never want to just leave it up to administrative controls, as in training or safe work procedures or our policies, and PPE? Right? The reason is we don't want to leave it up to the worker to make that conscious choice to protect themselves, right? PPE goes alongside with engineering controls, but it's not your first choice. Okay, so just remember that. Okay, and then just a quick risk assessment wheel. We got to identify the hazard. Then we let the people know who are at risk. What does that risk look like? What's the worst thing that can happen? And how probable is it about to happen? Record it, implement it, continuously review. And if you're in safety, you know that's all we do is continuously review our documentation. Okay, so a job hazard analysis. Now, I want to make this very clear. Job hazard analyses are really meant for those step-by-step procedures, okay? The difference between a safe work practice and a safe work procedure is a practice is your general do's and don'ts, okay? Safe work procedure is the same step-by-step safe way of doing the work to get the same result every time, okay? So job hazard analysis is like your draft form for that, okay? It's an assessment tool. We analyze a job to determine the hazards. So each step you're going to write down, a hazard should be associated to it along with a control. Okay, so step 1, break the job into steps. So we want to go with major steps. Don't get deep in the weeds of intricate details, okay? I started in safety about 7 years ago, and I kind of call it a mistake or call it whatever, but I told my boss at the time that I was absolutely terrified of writing safe work procedures. There was a lot of pressure, right? What happens when you're that scared of things? You just have to keep doing it over and over and over again. So with so much practice, I got better at it and I felt better about doing it, okay? The biggest thing is do not overthink it. Don't overthink it. Don't stress yourself out over it. Involve as many people as you can, right? We want to make sure we have the appropriate people helping us write these job procedures. And who better to have than the people who are actually out in the field doing it? Because there's nothing more important than for workers to feel respected and to give us respect when we ask them how they actually do their work and what hazards they encounter on a daily basis, okay? So I can't stress that enough. Make sure you involve the right people. This does not just fall on you, and you are the only sole person to be writing these out, okay? So involve management, workers, the committee. Maybe you can contact a specialist, or there's contractors that you can, get some information from. Google is helpful. I do love Google. I love that in the safety world, we're always sharing stuff. If you are getting things from Google, make sure you are always referencing it back to your provincial legislation and to the CSA standard, okay? Super important because, again, in my consulting time, I have seen too much of Australian documentation and we're here in Manitoba, okay? Okay, so step 2. We want to identify hazards for each of those steps. Okay, so quickly we'll cover this. So there are safety hazards, right? 5 major categories for hazards. What are they? Physical, chemical, biological, ergonomic, and psychosocial. So with our safety hazards, we've got our slip, trips, falls, electrical contact. Is there potential for fires or sparks? How about ergonomics? Are our guys material handling, or do we have carts or forklifts for them? Are they working around powered mobile equipment? Moving parts, right? Is there moving machinery anywhere that you can get pinched or pulled in? Think of those. Tool use. And then really important, who else is in our area, right? Are there other workers in the area? Is it public? Are we working in traffic? Okay. Health hazards, straightforward. Chemical exposure, biological exposure, physical agents, musculoskeletal injury or disorders, and psychosocial. What is the stress of this job? And is it pretty intense? Do we know the shift? Are we rotating workers? These kind of things. Touch on this. Physical agents, that would be our noise, vibration, radiation, extreme temperatures, and lighting. Okay, so when we look for our hazards, do we remember PME? But now it's PMEEP. Okay, pretty straightforward. People, equipment, materials, environment, and our process. Okay, consider these 5 categories and you should have every hazard identified, or nearly every hazard. Okay, so with every hazard identified, there has to be a control. Do not worry about repeating your control measures. Okay, don't overthink it. That one control measure could probably cover 3 hazards. Okay, we just need to make sure that we're overlapping and making sure that there's not a total exposed hazard there. Okay, I have provided Tiffany with the handouts. So this is just an example of a job hazard analysis. Okay, you can see up top, we've got our creation date. Is this a new JHA or a revised one? Who helped build it? Who was a part of the team? And then here's our setup. Okay, so what do we need to do before we actually do the work? What are the potential hazards? And then how do we control it? Now, to actually perform the job, what do we need to do? Step by step, okay? Over on the right-hand side is just the flip side of the page. What kind of equipment do we need? What kind of power tools are we working with? Powered mobile equipment? Do we need additional PPE? Okay, super important we go and name all of these things. And then our last category is additional information. So what kind of training is required to perform this job? Are we working with chemicals? What kind of safety data sheets do we have to reference? If there are machines around, do we have the manufacturer's manual? And then our legislation reference, okay? Now we're in the meats and potatoes. So we've got our job hazard analysis, okay? I'm gonna show you this quick video. Let's hope it works. Oops. Oh gosh, give me one sec. Okay, we're out. Let's see. I think I got it queued up here. Okay, can everybody see that? But one, I need to share sound. Okay.
Got it.
Bill got a new job working for the water utility. One of his first tasks is to take samples of the local drinking water from a collection site and send the samples to a lab for quality testing. Bill requests guidance from his coworkers, but only receives vague verbal instruction. Bill heads out to the collection site, unsure how to properly collect samples. While collecting samples, he drops the lid on the ground and puts it back on the sample bottle, possibly contaminating the sample. After the sample is collected, Bill puts the sample in a cardboard box and ships it to the testing facility. The testing facility receives it several days later. Since a standard operating procedure was not followed, the sample has been compromised and the test fails. The local news notifies the public that the town's drinking water has failed to pass its quality test and it's potentially contaminated. It's recommended the town avoid cooking with or drinking tap water without boiling it, and that everyone take precautions when showering or brushing their teeth. This type of situation can lead to some very real consequences, all because the standard operating procedure set in place was not followed. Let's go back to the beginning. Like before, Bill is tasked with collecting samples of the local drinking water for testing. But this time, he receives the standard operating procedure for collecting samples. Uh-oh, it looks like Bill has dropped the lid to the sample bottle again. But this time, he follows the instructions on the standard operating procedure and uses a new clean lid instead. The SOP states that all samples be placed in a secure container, so Bill puts the samples in a cooler rather than a cardboard box. Following the instructions on the SOP, he ships the cooler to the testing facility using overnight shipping. The lab receives the samples the next day. And because the SOP was followed, the test can be accurate, and it passes. Standard operating procedures are written for a variety of tasks. An SOP limits confusion, promotes effective training of new employees, and standardizes complex procedures. It's important they're followed to ensure safety, quality, and efficiency.
Okay, we're back. And, oh, how did I do this again? Oh, display. I got it. Okay. So you can see that safe work procedures are really important for training, right? The best way to train your staff is with your own documentation, your own procedures, or your own policy, because that's your statement saying, hey, this is how we do things around here, and this is what we expect. Okay, so a safe work procedure, it is our step-by-step written instruction on how the employer wants the task performed, very similar to how you would follow a recipe. My mom's a teacher, and I think it's the cutest thing when they teach those like 8-year-olds, okay, make me a instructional documentation on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? And without using a knife, they'll say you just spread everything with your fingers and slap bread together. It is very much like that. You want to make sure that your safe work procedures are understandable and can be followed properly. Okay, so you want to use concise wording. Okay, so I kind of touched on this, but I just want to go over it again. Safe work practices versus a safe work procedure. Safe work procedure, again, this is something that you guys can decide in your organization. They can be referenced as standard operating procedures, safe job procedures, safe work instructions, whatever you guys want to go for. Just remember, it's just a step-by-step guide, okay? So our safe work practices, very generic do's and don'ts, right? Using a step ladder is a do and don't practice, right? Don't stand on the top step. Do get off your ladder and move it to your next location. Don't bunny hop it, okay? It outlines how to perform a task with minimal risk to PMEEP, okay? So our people, equipment, material, environment, and process. The task does not need to be performed exactly the same way every time. Very important here. And then SWPs or safe work practices do support the procedures, okay? Safe work procedures, these are your final kind of draft after your JHA. This is what you would be training to people. Okay, so we want to summarize all of our information from the job hazard analysis. So everything you've written down on that first template I showed you, you basically just transfer it over to the safe work procedure one. You just might change a little more wording to make it more understandable, okay? Use positive language. People respond better to positive language, right? Start with an action lift, remove, open, pull. Okay, start with that. And highlight this. Keep it simple. We want to go for like a grade 8 level. Grade 8 reading level. Important details, but brief. I have seen, especially with my career in consulting, I've seen safe work procedures go on for like 6 pages. And I'm a safety professional and I do not want to read that much. Okay, I couldn't imagine what a worker would want to do with it. So keep it brief. I like to say, 10 to 15 steps. Any more than that, you might need to break the job into 2 different procedures. Okay, this really just describes how the work should be done. It's a communication tool. We are in an age where we can use photos and diagrams and videos as safe work procedures. So whatever really works for you guys, but feel free to get creative. Okay, I know with some language or communication barriers, photos are really helpful in today's world. Okay, with that positive language, I want to touch on one thing before we move on. Must versus should. Okay, there is a huge difference in those 2 words. Should is an action, responsibility, it's a duty. Okay, the should is like best for concerned objects. Okay, yeah, you should do that. Must is more compulsory, it's more necessary. Okay, the emphasis on it is greater. So you must do this. Really important verbiage. Okay. Okay, so now we've got our safe work develop, or our SWP, and we're about to develop it. What do we need? Well, we need all of our identification information. So what area does this apply for? Maybe you want to document the number of it, and that correlates with your job hazard analysis. They just kind of match up. That works. Who participated, wrote, and approved this safe work procedure? When did you complete it, and when is the revision date? Or have you already done one? Okay, really important that when you sign off, every time the SWP is reviewed or revised, there should be date tracking on it. Okay, this is more so for like internal tips, but always save as a new document and archive the previous version. I did get asked while I was presenting this at our conference last week, can you just sign your name basically with your job title? No, you should be signing or having people sign off with their name and job title, but their name has to be there just in case anything, is in question later on down the road. It's not to totally hold anybody accountable, but we do want to know who helped build this, and it is for protection reasons. Okay. So 2, we'll have our hazard identification and control measures. We might even have that critical ranking up at the top of the safe work procedure, and I'll show you that. 3, what type of personal protective equipment or other protection do we need while performing this task? Okay, special equipment or controls required. Make sure we mention what type of mobile equipment is going to be used. Is there fencing or guarding? Do we need additional light? Do we need to turn the ventilation on? Important stuff. Okay, emergency actions. So if this relays to your task, we want to make sure that we have actually emergency response in the SWP. Okay, so how do we respond to injury, spills, damage, equipment, failure? Think of those. Okay, and then last one, always our references. So our operator's manual, guidance documents, legislation, standards, safety data sheets, and any other safe work procedures or safe work practices. Okay. Now we're in the review process. So we want to make sure everyone who has helped us is still along with us, and we're getting ready to review and submit it. Okay. So review with your appropriate staff. Make sure everybody signs off. Then we get to begin with our implementation process. And do remember, this is ongoing. Revisions are bound to happen, and that's totally okay. Okay. Too often as a consultant, I do see safe work procedures written by one person. Okay. And most of the time, like I've said before, it's usually downloaded off online. And not many changes have been made. You want to make sure it works for your organization. And also, you want to make sure that it meets your legislation too, right? Okay, so here is an example of a safe work procedure. You guys might already have your own formatting, but this is just something if you do need, you can have the template as well, okay? So up top, description of work. Do we have our JHA and SWP numbered up? I don't know if you can see it, but over in the right-hand corner of the top, that's your critical ranking, okay? Potential hazards and controls. What can you face doing this task? And then just mark off what type of PPE you need. Just like our job hazard analysis, we've got our pre-operation. So what are we doing to prepare to do the job? We have our operation and then post-operation. Over on our right-hand side, we've got our equipment list again. Safety information, so what kind of training requirements, safety data sheets, all that jazz. And then just a section to document other relevant SWPs, okay? And then we've got our review, approval, and revision tracking. So we really want to make sure that when these safe work procedures are written and implemented, we want them signed off so that we know they're legitimate and it's the final copy, right? Okay, I'll quickly touch on policy development. So we should clearly tell the audience, why does this policy exist? Who does it affect? What are the major conditions and restrictions? When and under what circumstances it applies, and how it should be expected. Okay, some benefits do include setting boundaries. Employees of various backgrounds, cultures, and personalities can read about their organization's expectations of how to behave in the workplace. It does achieve consistency. So by following a step-by-step guide, all employees of different skill levels and backgrounds can achieve similar or identical results. It does give us data and reports. So it shows us areas of strengths and weaknesses and where to take some action. And it helps our decision-making skills, right? Work becomes easier to understand. With set procedures and policies, it does make workflows to and from an individual more standardized. Okay, so we want to identify our goal. Why are we writing this policy? Brainstorm tasks and processes. Again, who are you having help build this? Because it doesn't all land on you, okay? Decide on your format. Keep it concise. Keep it fluent with all of your other policies. Write your rules, guidelines, and policies. I do say that's probably your building block, okay? Once you know what your rules, guidelines, and other policies are, you just kind of build around it then, okay? 5, you have to consider the impact of your change. Who is it going to impact? Are you going to face some struggles? Is it going to be taken pretty quickly? What does that look like? Okay. Proofread and revise, and then publish and distribute, meaning train. Okay. This is my favorite topic. So I think we're good for time here. I got a couple more slides on training and monitoring. Okay, this doesn't just totally involve safe work procedures, but obviously that's where we're going to talk about the most. So safe work procedures would happen when you have a new employee on and it's their first day and you're giving them the orientation. Okay, it is going to be information overload, and most individuals can only handle 30% of what is being, given to them at that time during training. So once you have people read and review safe work procedures, that is not the be-all, end-all. It is a continuous training document, right? Along with training, you'd probably match them up with somebody who's more experienced and can kind of job shadow, okay? We want to go through coaching. Safe work procedures are fantastic for safety talks or toolbox talks, right? What better way to train people than with your own documentation? Incident investigation, safe work procedures do help us see kind of potentially where we went wrong or where there is a gap, and can we fill that gap now? Okay. Before I hop into this, I do want to say, make sure that we are considering vulnerable workers when we train, right? So we want to make sure that vulnerable workers are taken care of and they understand what it is they need to do to be safe, okay? So vulnerable workers are those workers who have greater exposure than most to injury and illness due to their lack of experience, reluctancy to ask questions, communication barriers, and potentially a new type of work. The term vulnerable worker does not just apply to one group. Some workers are more vulnerable to workplace injury, either due to language barriers or because they are new or young workers. Okay, that could be somebody who recently moved to or from another province or country, just started their first job, just returned to work after a long absence, total career change, right? Do not have adequate English language skills. How are we going to make sure that these people, we protect them and we train them so that they understand in their way? Okay. I know that our organization, we ended up buying a couple translators for our in-class sessions, and it gives subtitles underneath, which is pretty cool. So whatever our trainer is saying, it translates to another language, okay? Another key factor here is young workers aged 15 to 24 are 3 times more likely to be injured on the job than more experienced workers, okay? Young workers are vulnerable, typically because they're involved in seasonal or part-time or casual work, and often the job changes frequently. It could also be combined with a lack of experience, reluctance to ask questions, okay? That puts them at a greater risk. So we want to make sure that they are partnered up with somebody who can help them learn safety the right way. Okay. So here we want to be proactive with all of our job hazard analysis and SWPs. Okay. I mentioned this at the beginning. It is a stipulated every 3 years, we're going to review and revise documents. If nothing has changed, right? No process in that safe work procedure has changed. You guys can just review it as a whole, right? That would include your committee, management, and then retrain it to people. Okay, but that's fine if nothing changes. Something you do want to check out though, while you're revising, or if you need to do it beforehand, is your information current, right? Do we have our proper regulations and standards? Are they up to date? Has anything changed? And then our reactive approach, right? Was there an incident? Where can we now fill that gap? And did we identify this hazard while we were building the JHA and SWP? Maybe not. So now we can fill that in and put in our corrective actions. Okay. So that was a lot of information jammed into there. I am going to leave my information up on the screen. So do feel free to email me. I won't be available until the middle of February, but send me all of your information, any questions you have. I will totally be happy to share that. Tiffany has my contact information as well, so you guys can message me there. Now it's question.
Miranda,
Hey.
thank you so much. It's really great presentation. We got great comments on the chat, and I have already copied the comments and the question on the document. So you
Okay.
could review it and see you could answer the question, please.
Okay, what do we got? Okay, so one question I have, physical demand analysis. Yeah, so if that covers everything that the job, oh, sorry, you know what? This is my first time. The question was, do you use PDA or PDDs or only JHAs? Okay. PDAs, I guess, are physical demands analysis. As long as it meets the same information that a job hazard analysis would, it should help you in writing your safe work procedure. Whatever your organization calls them would be fine. Okay. Yeah, here was another comment. So I really like the photos, pictograms for PPE. Your SWP should further detail the type of PPE to ensure workers are selecting the appropriate PPE. That's fantastic. Yeah, you can add that in your controls. You can add in your in your pre-operation. However that works for you guys, I think that's great. Yes, more detail in the protective equipment. Okay. Yes, I want this to be super clear for everybody. The simpler the writing, the easier it is for people to understand, right? We want to use grade 8 reading level vocabulary, okay? Don't make it super hard. Short, simple, sweet sentences, okay? Any recommendations for writing procedures when the most common hazards are people? For example, students who frequently bite, spit, hit, or push. That's a really good one. You know, I've never actually had to deal with that. That's not a common hazard for me and my staff. But whoever sent that, if you want to send me an email, I can definitely help and see what I can find to give some control measures. But yeah, that would be a really difficult one to cover. How graphic or scary should illustrations of worse things that can happen be? Yeah, so I grew up in a time where, I mean, we were watching MTV and there would be some graphic skateboarding injuries on television. It was a whole TV series. Now it's a little more sensitive. So that's going to be on you guys. That's going to be discretionary. Depends what type of group you have. I guess it goes down to reading your group and who you're going to be training that to. Okay. That's a good question because sometimes when I'm training, I'm like, what's too much? Peep. Yeah. So PME, it's your people, equipment, material, process, and environment. And if you do want the PowerPoint, Tiffany has it, so you can ask her or shoot me an email. Is there anything else? You know what? I'll put my contact information in the chat. Give me a sec. That'll probably be easier.
Yeah, I'm going to send all the folks with the slide and also the copy of the
Awesome.
job hazard analysis and the safe work procedure. So,
Cool.
and you all have the copies. And of course, you know, the recording link for this session is also going to be sent out to as well. Do you folks have any questions before we wrap up the session? Please submit it here, please.
I do want to say thank you to everybody who joined in. This is so much fun. And it's a little easier when you're just staring at a computer. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I will give another minute or two. If you guys have no more question, we could conclude the session here. But on behalf of the Occupational Health Center, thank you all of you for joining this session. Yeah, and great information you pass on to the presentation. All the information is so clear and simple. It's so easy to understand. I really appreciate you mentioned about vulnerable workers. I think
Yeah.
this is so important for organization. If you have some people who is really vulnerable, they're new to organization, they have really less skilled or coming from different ethnic backgrounds for the communication barriers, the language barriers, those are so important. How you communicate with them with pictures and images, video, and language is what we're using for, right? So yeah, this is really, really great point you bring it out. Yeah. Mhm.
We got one. I don't know if this is so much a question, but maybe just a comment.
Yeah.
Oh yes, PPE, proper fit and handling. Yeah, so what I do for my clients actually, instead of putting in one safe work procedure, like, hey, you need to do this, make sure your PPE fits, have that reference. So have a single safe work procedure for all of your PPE and what that looks like, use, care, and maintenance. And then wherever your safe work procedures go, if it needs PPE, you can just reference that safe work practice. Does that make sense? It just shortens up the safe work procedure because we don't want super long ones. But if we can kind of tag two together, I think that's really helpful, and it helps people kind of separate the two, and it reduces jargon, right? But yeah, that's great.
Okay, it seems like I have no more question. Yeah. Thank you, Miranda. I really appreciate your time to speak with us this hour. Appreciate, your knowledge and sharing everything, from your slide. Appreciate that, yeah, someone talking about the COVID mask. Is it a PPE too, including?
Depends what your task is, right? Like, it's not so prevalent, or in at least my field, it's not so much prevalent anymore. So if that's something that's a policy within your workplace, just make sure you include it. But yeah, that would, I guess, I assume that would become like a PPE tag in, if that makes sense. But good point.
Awesome. Okay, great. Have yourself a great afternoon, everyone. We will see you, next time though.
Awesome.
Take
Thank you
care.
again, everybody.
Work safe, everyone. Bye.
Bye.